She was raised to obey, but one look from him was enough to set everything ablaze, in her body, her soul, and in the bed where she finally discovered what it means to live. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post daily. Continuing, the Texas heat burned the skin even before the sun fully rose. At the Congregation Sons of Promise, one of the largest Pentecostal churches in the American Midwest, the day already began with the sound of worshippers organizing chairs in the main temple. It was Sunday, and like every Sunday for the past 21 years, Hope woke up at 5 in the morning to help her stepmother prepare breakfast for the visiting pastors. Hope Sinclair had grown up amidst hymns and prayers, daughter of Pastor Joshua Sinclair, one of the most respected and feared figures in the region's conservative evangelical movement. From an early age, she learned that her place was in silence, in obedience, in the modesty that clothed her from head to toe. Long dresses, hair always tied back, eyes downcast. She was the living symbol of Christian purity, the perfect daughter of the man of God. But that morning, as she arranged the plates on the table in the pastoral house, something weighed in her stomach beyond the usual anxiety. Today would be the day. Today, after the main service, she would be officially introduced as the fiancée of Samuel Foster, heir to one of the denomination's most traditional families. A union that would seal not just two hearts, at least that's what her father said, but two lineages of faith and prosperity. Samuel had arrived on Friday from New York City, where he was studying theology at a renowned seminary. 28 years, old solid education, a guaranteed future in church leadership, the perfect groom. During Friday's dinner, he had been kind, polite, quoting appropriate verses and making everyone laugh with his seminary stories. But when they were alone for a few minutes in the pastoral house garden, he had held her wrist with unnecessary force. "I hope you understand your role, Hope," he had said, his fingers squeezing until it hurt. "A submissive wife is her husband's crown, and I do not tolerate disobedience." The mark had disappeared by the next morning, but the memory of the pain remained. Just as the memory of the cold smile he gave when she tried to pull away remained. "Hope, where is your head, girl?" Mrs. Martha's voice, her stepmother, brought her back to the present. The 50-year-old woman watched her with disapproval, hands on her hips. "Sorry, Mother Martha, I was thinking about the ceremony." "Well, it's best that your thoughts are where they should be. Today is a special day. Pastor Samuel is a blessing in your life, and you should be thanking God for this opportunity." Opportunity. That's always how they referred to her future, never as a choice, always as an opportunity granted by divine grace and paternal wisdom. Hope nodded and went back to setting the table, trying to ignore the tightness in her chest. The church began to fill at 8 in the morning. The Congregation Sons of Promise was not just a temple, it was an impressive complex with capacity for 3,000 people, a Christian school, its own radio station, and even a small local television broadcaster. Pastor Joshua had built all of this over 30 years of ministry, transforming a small rural congregation into one of the largest evangelical centers in the state. Hope took her place in the first row beside the other daughters of pastors and leaders. She wore her best dress, navy blue, long sleeves, a skirt that covered her ankles, her hair pulled back in a low bun as always. Beside her, Samuel smiled at the greetings of the faithful passing by. He wore an impeccable grey suit, his brown leather Bible under his arm, the proud bearing of one born to lead. "My future wife," he said to each person who greeted them, his hand possessively on her shoulder. A young woman of solid principles, each word was an added weight on Hope's shoulders. Future wife. Property already defined, destiny already sealed. She smiled and thanked them for the congratulations, but inside, she felt as if she was suffocating. The service began with the congregation's typical fervor, an 80-voice choir, a full band, Pastor Joshua commanding everything from the pulpit with the authority of someone who never doubted being on the right side of history. He was an imposing man at 55, with perfectly coiffed gray hair and a deep voice that echoed through the temple without needing a microphone. "My brothers and sisters," he thundered when it was time for the sermon, "today is a day of celebration, not just because we are in the house of the Lord, but because we will witness the union of two blessed families." The congregation exploded in applause and hallelujahs. Hope felt her stomach churn. "My daughter Hope," the pastor continued, extending his hand towards her, "raised in the ways of the Lord, an example of purity and obedience, will be united with young Samuel Foster, one of the future leaders of our denomination." More applause. Samuel stood up, pulling Hope by the hand. She also stood, her legs trembling, feeling 3,000 pairs of eyes on her. Her father continued to speak about the importance of the Christian family, about the role of the woman as a suitable helper, about God's blessing on that union. It was then that Samuel squeezed her hand with excessive force, his fingers like claws digging into her skin. She tried to discreetly pull away, but he squeezed harder, maintaining a smile for the congregation. "Submission," he whispered in her ear, too low for anyone else to hear. "That's what I expect from you in everything." The grip tightened, and Hope couldn't suppress a small cry of pain. Some people in the first row noticed but interpreted it as emotion of the moment. It was at that exact instant that the main doors of the temple burst open with a crash. The silence was instantaneous and total. 3,000 people turned their heads at the same time, and Pastor Joshua stopped mid-sentence. Down the central aisles, a man walked with firm steps towards the pulpit, and Hope felt her heart stop. She knew him. Everyone in the region knew him, at least by name and reputation. Dante Blackwood, the richest and most powerful man in Texas, owner of an empire that included mining, agribusiness, and civil construction. They said he had started from nothing, the son of a farm worker who had built an empire with his own hands. They also said he was dangerous, ruthless in business, a man who knew no limits when he wanted something. He was about 40 years old, with black hair with a few grey strands at his temples, over 6 feet tall. He wore a black dress shirt, dark jeans, and leather boots that echoed on the temple's marble floor. He didn't smile, he didn't greet anyone. He just walked, his dark eyes fixed on something at the front of the temple, on Hope. "What is this man doing here?" Pastor Joshua asked into the microphone, his voice laden with authority and disapproval. Dante stopped right in front of the pulpit, only a few feet from where Hope and Samuel stood. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the temple effortlessly, deep and clear. "I've come to claim what belongs to me." A murmur ran through the congregation. Pastor Joshua descended from the pulpit, placing himself between Dante and the young couple. "Mr. Blackwood, you have nothing that belongs to you in this house of God. I suggest you withdraw immediately." "No." The answer was simple, direct, loaded with an authority that made Pastor Joshua take a step back. Dante then looked directly at Samuel, who was still holding Hope's hand tightly. "Let her go." "How dare you come here and give orders?" Samuel retorted, trying to maintain his composure, but Hope could feel his hands trembling slightly. "This is a sacred ceremony, and Hope is my fiancée." "Hope," Dante spoke, ignoring Samuel completely and looking directly into her eyes. "Do you want to be saved?" The question echoed through the temple like thunder. It was impossible, unthinkable. No one had ever asked her what she wanted. Not her father, not her stepmother, not Samuel, not the church leaders. Her entire life had been decided by others, always in the name of God and tradition. "She has nothing to answer," Pastor Joshua intervened, stepping back up to the pulpit. "My daughter is an obedient and God-fearing young woman, and she will not be influenced by your devilish words." "Devilish?" Dante smiled for the first time, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. "Pastor, you know devilish words well. You've taught some to your daughter over the years." The entire congregation tensed. There was something in Dante's voice, a dangerous certainty that made even Pastor Joshua hesitate. "What are you talking about?" the pastor asked, but his voice had lost some of its previous authority. "I'm talking about the truth, Pastor, about how you raised this girl to be a trophy, about how you allowed her to be treated as property, about how you pretended not to see when your future son-in-law hurt her last Friday." A deadly silence fell over the temple. How could he know? Hope felt her legs weaken, but she also felt something new, a small flame of hope in her chest. "You're lying," Samuel shouted, squeezing Hope's hand even tighter. Now she couldn't suppress a moan of pain. That's when Dante moved. In 2 steps, he was beside Samuel. One hand gripped the young pastor's wrist with surgical precision, applying pressure that made Samuel immediately release Hope and double over in pain. "If you touch her one more time," Dante said, his voice low but audible throughout the temple, "I'll break your arm and then I'll break you. Let go of my fiancé." Hope cried, but her voice came out weak, automatically repeating what was expected of her. Dante released Samuel and turned to her. His eyes were dark as coal, but there was something in them she had never seen before in any man's eyes. Respect. "He is not your fiancé," Dante said softly. "He is just another man who wants to possess you, and you are no one's property." He extended his hand to her, without touching her, just offering, "The choice is yours, Hope. For the first time in your life, the choice is yours." Pastor Joshua descended from the pulpit, again his face red with rage. "How dare you come into the house of God to sow discord? My daughter is being blessed with a holy marriage, and you come here with your serpent's words." "Holy?" Dante laughed bitterly, without taking his eyes off Hope. "Pastor, there is nothing holy about forcing a 21-year-old woman to marry a man she doesn't even know, just because it suits the church's business." "Those are lies," Samuel shouted, holding his bruised wrist. "I love Hope." "Love?" Dante finally looked at Samuel. "Do you know her middle name? Do you know her favorite color? Have you ever asked her what she dreams of doing with her life? Or is she just a pawn in your plan to ascend the church hierarchy?" Samuel opened and closed his mouth, clearly speechless. We will get to know each other after the wedding. That's how it works in Christian marriages." "In arranged marriages," Dante corrected, "to seal political alliances disguised as faith." The congregation was in an uproar. Some people began to stand up, others whispered prayers, still others seemed fascinated by the confrontation. Pastor Joshua raised his hands, trying to regain control of the situation. "Brothers and sisters, do not be deceived. This man is known for his dissolute life, for his questionable business dealings. He comes here to sow discord because he cannot stand to see purity and holiness." "Dissolute?" Dante smiled again, and this time there was something dangerous in that smile. "Pastor, do you really want to talk about a dissolute life? Do you want me to tell your congregation about your offshore tax haven bank account, about the embezzlement of offerings, about the luxury hotels you frequent when you travel for congresses in other cities?" Pastor Joshua's face instantly paled. "You have no proof of anything." "I do," Dante said calmly, "and I can share it with the district attorney's office at any time." The temple erupted in murmurs. Hope looked at her father, seeing him for the first time, not as the unquestionable authority he had always been, but as a frightened and guilty man. How many things did she not know about the man who had controlled every aspect of her life? "Hope," Dante spoke to her again, his voice soft, contrasting with the harshness he had directed at the others. "You can stay here, you can marry him. You can live the life they chose for you, or you can come with me." "Where?" she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. "To a place where no one will decide for you, where you can discover who you truly are." "And what do you want from me?" The question came out before she could control herself. Dante tilted his head slightly, as if considering the answer. "I want you to be free, and I want that, when you are truly free, you decide if you want to stay by my side." "She's not going anywhere," Pastor Joshua shouted. "She's my daughter, and she'll stay here." "Your daughter?" Dante asked, and there was something new in his voice now, something dangerous. "Pastor, perhaps it's time to tell Hope the truth about her mother." The silence that followed was different from the previous ones. It was heavy, laden, as if the air itself had grown denser. Hope felt her heart pound. "What truth?" she asked, looking at her father. Pastor Joshua was clearly in a panic now. "No, there's nothing to tell. Your mother died in childbirth, you know that." "She died, yes," Dante confirmed, "but not in childbirth, and not the way he told you." Hope felt the world spin around her. 21 years of lies began to crumble in a matter of seconds. "How do you know about my mother?" Because, Dante said, taking a step towards her, Helena Blackwood was my sister. Dante's words echoed through the temple like a bomb exploding in slow motion. Hope felt her legs weaken, and if it weren't for Samuel's arm still holding her shoulder, she would have fallen right there. Helena Blackwood was your sister? She managed to whisper, her voice broken. My younger sister, Dante confirmed, his eyes never leaving her face. 2 years younger than me. Her name was Helena Blackwood Sinclair. She married your father when she was 17. Pastor Joshua was visibly desperate now. Lies, all lies. Helena was an orphan. I saved her from life on the streets. Helena grew up on the Blackwood Ranch with me, Dante continued, ignoring the pastor's objections. Our parents died when she was 15. I took over the family business and looked after her. She was brilliant, Hope. She wanted to study medicine to help people, but she fell in love with your father when he was just a young, itinerant preacher. The congregation watched the drama unfold in absolute silence. Samuel had released Hope and taken a few steps back, clearly realizing that the situation had completely escaped his control. I warned Helena about him, Dante continued, his voice laden with an old pain. I saw how he looked at her money, at the properties she had inherited. But she was in love. She married him against my will. And then? Hope asked, tears beginning to stream down her face. Then he brought her here, isolated her from her family, from her inheritance, from her dreams. Helena donated everything she had for the construction of this church, believing she was serving God. When you were born, she was happy, but she was also sick. Pastor Joshua took a step forward, trying to regain control. Enough! I will not allow you to come here with these fabrications. Fabrications? Dante laughed bitterly. Pastor, Helena wrote me letters for 5 years, letters that I still have, telling how you forbade her from leaving the house, from seeing other people, from using her own money, how you controlled every aspect of her life. Hope felt as if she were hearing about a parallel life, a version of her own existence. She died when I was 6 months old, she said, her voice small. She died because she was depressed, isolated, without access to adequate medical treatment, Dante corrected. Because when she finally decided to leave here and go home, he locked her in. Literally. The silence was now sepulchral. Even the babies in their mother's arms seemed to feel the gravity of the moment. Your mother tried to escape 3 times, Dante continued. On the 3rd time she managed to reach the main road. That's when she had the accident. The car that hit her was never found. Are you suggesting that Pastor Joshua began, but his voice failed him. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm saying that Helena Blackwood died trying to get home, and you raised her daughter as a prisoner, exactly as you did with her. Hope looked at the man she had always considered her father, and for the first time in 21 years, she truly saw him. She saw the fear in his eyes, the guilt he tried to hide behind religious authority, the way his hands trembled slightly. Is it true? She asked, her voice firmer. Now. Pastor Joshua opened and closed his mouth several times before he could speak. Helena was a rebellious woman. She didn't understand her place as a Christian wife. I tried to help her find the way. You locked her in, Hope said, and it wasn't a question. For her own good, to protect her from worldly influences. Like you protect me. The realization hit Hope like a lightning bolt. Her entire life had been a repetition of her mother's life. The same control, the same isolation, the same manipulation disguised as divine protection. Hope, Samuel approached again, trying to regain some control of the situation. Don't listen to these lies. We are a blessed family, and our marriage will... No, she said, interrupting him for the first time in her life. The word came out with more force than she expected, echoing through the temple. Samuel stopped, surprised. What did you say? I said no. Hope turned to him and for the first time looked him directly in the eyes. I will not marry you. I will not repeat my mother's life. You have no choice, Pastor Joshua shouted. You are my daughter and you will obey. I'm not your daughter, Hope replied, her voice growing in intensity. I am the daughter of Helena Blackwood, and she died trying to escape from you. Dante extended his hand again, and this time there was a silent urgency in the gesture. "Come with me, Hope. Let me show you who your mother truly was." She looked at the extended hand. She looked at Samuel, who watched her with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She looked at Pastor Joshua, who tried to maintain authority, even as the world crumbled around him. She looked at the 3,000 faces of the congregation, all waiting to see what she would do. For the first time in 21 years, the choice was hers. Hope touched Dante's hand. The contact was like an electric shock. Strong, calloused fingers wrapped around hers, and she felt a security she had never experienced before. Dante didn't squeeze, didn't force, didn't hurt. He just held, offering strength and support. "Are you sure?" he asked softly, just for her to hear. "I am." Together they began to walk towards the exit. The congregation automatically parted, opening a path like the Red Sea. Some whispered prayers, others seemed too shocked to react, still others watched with a curiosity they couldn't hide. "Hope," Pastor Joshua shouted behind them. "If you walk out those doors, you will no longer be my daughter. You will no longer have a place in this house." She paused for a moment without turning around. "I never did," she replied, and continued walking. Samuel tried to follow them, but Dante turned quickly, his gaze filled with a silent promise that made the young pastor retreat. "If you try to follow her," Dante said, his voice low but audible, "you will regret it." Outside, the Texas sun was high and relentless. Hope blinked several times, trying to adjust to the brightness after the dimness of the temple. Dante led her to a black pickup truck parked in front of the church, a robust and expensive vehicle that contrasted with the popular cars of the faithful. "Where are we going?" she asked when he opened the passenger door for her. "Home," Dante replied, "to the home where your mother grew up." The journey took 40 minutes along the rural roads of Texas. Hope looked out the window, seeing the plains stretch to the horizon, the cattle ranches and soybean plantations that defined the region's economy. Dante drove in silence, giving her time to process everything that had happened. "How did you know?" she finally asked. "About Samuel hurting me, about the wedding." "I have eyes and ears in many places," he replied. "And when I heard that Helena's daughter was about to be forced into an arranged marriage, I couldn't stand by." "Were you watching me?" "Protecting," he corrected. "There's a difference." Hope thought about that. All her life, protection had meant imprisonment, control, limitation. But there was something different in the way Dante spoke, a quality she couldn't fully define. "And now, what will happen to me?" Dante looked at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. "Now you'll discover who you are when no one is telling you what to do." The Blackwood Ranch appeared on the horizon like a mirage. It was an impressive complex, a modernized colonial-style main house, several smaller buildings scattered across the property, corrals and stables in the distance, and an expanse of land that seemed to stretch to infinity. Everything impeccably maintained, but in a way that spoke of real work and prosperity, not empty ostentation. "Is this where my mother grew up?" Hope asked admiringly. "Helena loved to ride through these lands," Dante said, driving down the dirt road that led to the main house. She said it was where she felt most free. The main house was even more impressive up close. 2 stories, wide verandas overlooking a well-kept garden, solid wood furniture visible through the open windows. There were employees working in the gardens, but they only greeted Dante discreetly, without making a fuss. A woman of about 50 came out of the house when the truck stopped. She was dark-haired with grey hair tied in a bun, an apron over a simple but well-cut dress. Her face lit up when she saw Hope. "My God," she murmured, bringing her hands to her chest. "She's just like Helena." "Rose, this is Hope," Dante said, getting out of the truck. "Hope, this is Rose. She took care of your mother and she took care of me too." Rose approached with tears in her eyes. "Child, I knew you when you were 2 months old. Helena brought you here once, secretly. You slept in my lap all afternoon." The information hit Hope as yet another revelation. Her mother had been there, had brought her to see that place. It was another piece of the puzzle of a life she never knew existed. "Rose will take care of you," Dante said. "She'll show you Helena's room, tell you stories you've never heard." "And you?" Hope asked, realizing there was an implicit farewell in his words. "I have some things to resolve. People who need to understand that you are under my protection now." There was something in the way he said that which sent a shiver down Hope's spine. Not of fear, but of an excitement she couldn't explain. "What do you mean by your protection?" Dante approached her, close enough for her to feel the warmth emanating from his body. It was the first time they had been truly close, and Hope found she had to tilt her head back to look into his eyes. "I mean, no one will hurt you again," he said, his voice low and intense. "No one will force you to do anything you don't want to, and no one will decide your life for you. What if I want to leave? Then you leave. The choice will always be yours." It was the first time in her life someone had offered her a real choice, without manipulation, without emotional blackmail, without threatened consequences. Freedom was such a strange feeling that it was almost frightening. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't even know me." "Yes, I do." Dante raised his hand, almost touching her face, but stopping inches from her skin. "You have Helena's eyes, and the same strength she had. The difference is that I'm going to give you the chance I couldn't give her." The afternoon was a succession of discoveries. Rose took Hope to her mother's room, preserved exactly as she had left it 21 years earlier. There were medical books on the shelves, colorful clothes in the wardrobe, a shocking contrast to the monochromatic dresses Hope had worn all her life, photographs of her mother laughing, riding horses, embracing Dante. She was happy here, Rose said, showing a photo of Helena at 16, in shorts and a t-shirt, sitting on the veranda with a book in her lap. Intelligent, determined, full of life. When she married and left, it was as if the sun had gone out in this house. What was she like, really? Brave, Rose replied without hesitation, stubborn when she thought she was right. She protected the employees when Dante became too demanding. She dreamed of studying medicine and coming back here to care for the people of the region. Hope touched her mother's things with reverence. Medical books, colorful clothes, simple but beautiful jewelry, a diary that Rose said she could read when she was ready. Why did Dante preserve all of this? Because he blames himself, Rose said sadly. He thinks he should have prevented the marriage, should have fought harder to bring her back. When Helena died, he became different, more closed off, harder. He focused only on business. He never married. Never. He said he wouldn't repeat the mistakes of letting someone he loved get away. The information created a strange feeling in Hope's stomach. There was something profoundly lonely in the idea of Dante preserving his sister's room for 21 years, carrying the guilt and pain alone. By nightfall, she was on the house's veranda, wearing one of Helena's outfits, a light skirt and a cotton blouse that made her feel strangely free after decades of heavy fabrics. Rose had insisted, saying the clothes were just waiting for someone to wear them again. That's when Dante returned. She heard him arriving before she saw him, the sound of the pickup truck on the dirt road. When he climbed the veranda steps, she noticed there was something different about him. A quiet satisfaction, as if he had solved an important problem. "How was your first day?" he asked, sitting in the chair beside her. "Disturbing, liberating, confusing." Hope looked at him. "Did you go solve a problem with my father?" "With him and with others." Dante settled into the chair, his eyes turned towards the horizon where the sun was setting over the plains. "Pastor Joshua understood that it would be better for everyone if he didn't try to reclaim you. Samuel, too. What did you do?" "Nothing they didn't deserve." He turned to look at her. "Are you regretting it?" The question caught Hope off guard. Was she regretting it? She had left everything she knew, her whole life, all the people. In less than 12 hours, she had discovered that her entire life had been built on lies. "No," she replied, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice. "I'm not regretting. Even knowing you can't go back. Especially knowing I don't need to go back." Dante smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she saw from him. It completely transformed his face, revealing the man behind the intimidating reputation. "Helena would be proud of you." "Tell me more about her," Hope asked. "Tell me about who I should have been." 3 weeks had passed since Hope left the congregation Sons of Promise, and she felt as if she had awakened from a long, suffocating dream. Each morning on the Blackwood Ranch brought a new discovery about herself, about her mother, about a world she had never known existed. Dante had kept his word about freedom of choice. He never forced her into anything, never imposed schedules or rules, never questioned her decisions. But his presence was constant, not suffocating like the surveillance she was used to, but protective like a strong shadow that discreetly followed her. That morning she woke before dawn and went to the kitchen, where Rose was already preparing coffee. She had grown accustomed to helping with household chores, but not out of obligation, out of pleasure, out of feeling that she finally belonged somewhere. "Didn't sleep well again?" Rose asked, noticing the subtle dark circles under Hope's eyes. "I dreamed about her," Hope admitted, pouring herself coffee. "About my mother. I dream almost every night now." "Are they good dreams or bad?" "Different. Sometimes I dream she's here, showing me things. Sometimes I dream about the accident." Hope paused, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Rose, do you really think it was an accident?" The older woman stopped what she was doing and looked directly at Hope. "Child, there are questions best asked of those who have the answers." "Dante? He knew your mother, better than anyone, and he was the one who investigated her death when the police simply closed the case." Before Hope could ask anything else, the kitchen door opened and Dante entered. Even after 3 weeks, she still felt that thrill when she saw him. He was dressed for riding, jeans, a cotton shirt, leather boots, his hair still damp from a shower. "Good morning," he said, kissing Rose on the top of her head as a son would his mother. To Hope, just a nod, but his eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than necessary. "Riding early today," Rose commented, serving him coffee. "Need to check the north pasture fence," Dante replied, but his eyes were still on Hope. "Want to come along? It's time you saw the entire property." It was the first time he had invited her to accompany him on ranch work. Hope felt her heart quicken. I don't ride very well." "Your mother didn't either at first. Helena learned here." The smile Dante offered was different from all the others she had seen, softer, more personal, laden with memories. "All right, I'll go with you." An hour later, Hope was mounted on a gentle mare named Star, following Dante through the pasture towards the property limits. He rode an imposing black stallion that responded to the slightest movements of his legs and hands, clearly a pair accustomed to working together. "How many acres is the property?" Hope asked, admiring the vastness of the land. 12,000. Helena inherited 6,000 from our father, and I bought the rest over the years." "That's a lot of money." "It's work," Dante corrected. "I started at 18 with an old pickup truck and a lot of willingness to work. Helena always helped me with the administrative side. She was good with numbers." Riding with Dante was like having a private lesson about a world Hope had never known. He showed her the different types of cattle, explained pasture rotation, crop planning, resource management. But more than that, she saw how he related to the employees, with mutual respect, knowing their families' names, asking about personal problems. "You're not like they say," she commented, when they stopped to rest near a pond. "And what do they say I am? Dangerous, ruthless, heartless." Dante laughed, dismounting and helping her down from Star. "I'm dangerous when I need to be. Ruthless when someone messes with those I protect. Heartless." He paused, looking directly at her. "Depends on who it's for." There was something in the air between them, a tension that had been growing for days. Hope felt it every time they were alone, every time he looked at her for a moment longer, every time their hands accidentally touched. It was different from anything she had felt before, not the icy fear Samuel inspired, but a low heat in her stomach that left her breathless. "Dante," she began, not knowing exactly what she wanted to say. "Yes? Why do you keep your distance from me?" The question came out before she could censor it. Dante stood still for a moment, then approached slowly. When he stopped, he was close enough for her to feel the warmth of his body. "Because you spent 21 years being controlled by men who made decisions for you," he said, his voice low. "I don't want to be another one. What if the decision is mine? Are you sure you know what your decision is, or are you confusing gratitude with other things?" The question was fair, and Hope knew it. How to distinguish between gratitude for her rescue and genuine attraction? How to know if what she felt was real when she had so little experience with her own feelings? "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know that when you're near I feel something I've never felt before, and I know that when you leave I miss you." Dante raised his hand, lightly touching her face. It was the first time he had touched her intimately, and Hope instinctively leaned into the touch. "Hope," he murmured, "you are discovering who you are. I don't want to influence that discovery. What if who I am is someone who wants you?" The question hung between them like a fragile bridge. Dante studied her for a long moment, his fingers still tracing the line of her jaw. "If it is," he said finally, "when you are absolutely sure, tell me." Before she could answer, he moved away, returning to the work of checking the fence as if nothing had happened. But Hope saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the reins more tightly than necessary. The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching engines. Dante immediately became alert, reaching for the revolver he carried in his holster. "Hope, get behind me," he ordered, and she obeyed without question. 3 pickup trucks appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust on the rural road. When they stopped near them, Hope immediately recognized who was getting out of the vehicles: Pastor Joshua, Samuel, and several church security men. "I've come to get my daughter," Pastor Joshua announced, walking towards them with forced authority. "Your daughter," Dante replied calmly, but Hope could feel the tension radiating from him. "I don't see your daughter. Here." "Hope, stop this rebellion," Pastor Joshua addressed her directly. "You've been deceived by this man. Come home, and we can forget this madness." "This is my home now," Hope replied, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice. Samuel took a step forward, his face contorted in a mixture of anger and desire. "Hope, you've been corrupted. But I can still save you. We can still get married." "No," she said, and the word echoed across the open landscape. "I will never marry you." "You have no choice," Samuel shouted, losing his composure. "You're my fiancé. You belong to me." That's when Dante moved. In 2 quick steps, he was between Samuel and Hope, his hand on the hilt of his weapon. "She belongs to no one," Dante said, his voice dangerously low. "And if you talk about possessing her again, you'll find out why they call me dangerous." "You can't threaten us," Pastor Joshua intervened. "We are men of God. Men of God don't force women into marriages they don't want," Dante retorted, "and they don't hit them when they resist." "Liar!" Samuel shouted. Dante smiled, but there was no humor in the expression. "Rose, bring the security camera footage from last Friday when he was at the ranch." Samuel's face instantly paled. "What cameras?" "The cameras that caught you trying to force Hope behind the stable. The ones that show her saying no and you not stopping." Hope felt her stomach churn. She remembered the moment. Samuel had shown up at the ranch unannounced, saying he wanted to talk to her. He had tried to kiss her by force, ignored her when she said no, only stopped when Rose appeared. That was a misunderstanding," Samuel stammered. "It wasn't," Hope said, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "You tried to force me, like you tried many times during our engagement." Pastor Joshua looked at Samuel with something that might have been surprise, or perhaps just irritation at being discovered. "Samuel, is this true? She's my fiancée. I have rights." The answer condemned Samuel completely. Dante said nothing, just watched Pastor Joshua process what he had just heard. "Mr. Blackwood," Pastor Joshua said finally, turning to Dante, "perhaps we can reach an agreement. Hope has always been a difficult girl. Perhaps it's best for everyone if she stays here." The ease with which Pastor Joshua abandoned Hope was like a slap in the face. 21 years raising her, controlling her, using her as a symbol of his authority, and the moment she became inconvenient, he simply discarded her. "I want no agreement with you," Dante replied. "I want you off my land and never to return. And Helena's properties. The inheritance that legally—" "Legally it was Helena's, and now it's Hope's," Dante interrupted. "I have all the documents. If you want to dispute it in court, I'll be happy to present the evidence of how you improperly appropriated her assets." Pastor Joshua clearly did not expect this. His authority, so absolute in the church, had no power there. "This will not stand," he said, backing towards the pickup trucks. "God's justice." "God's justice," Dante interrupted, "perhaps begins with you accounting for the church's diverted funds. I have an interesting file on that too." The threat was enough. Pastor Joshua got into the pickup truck without another word, Samuel following him. But before getting into the vehicle, Samuel shouted, "You'll regret it, Hope. When he tires of you and throws you out, you'll have nowhere to go back." The pickup trucks departed, leaving only dust and silence behind. Hope was trembling, not from fear but from adrenaline. She had confronted the two men who had controlled her entire life and had won. "Are you okay?" Dante asked, gently touching her arm. "I am," she replied, and realized it was true. "I'm more than okay. I'm free." Dante smiled, that genuine smile that completely transformed his face. "Your mother would be proud." "Dante," she said, looking directly into his eyes, "about what we talked about before, about being absolutely sure." "Yes, I'm sure. It's not gratitude, it's not dependence, it's choice." His eyes darkened, but he didn't move. "Hope, I choose you," she said, taking a step towards him. "I choose this. I choose us." This time, when he raised his hand to touch her face, he didn't stop. His fingers traced the line of her jaw, descended to her neck, rose to intertwine in her hair. "Are you sure?" he murmured, his face inches from hers. "Absolutely." The kiss was unlike anything Hope had imagined. It wasn't force or domination, but mutual discovery. Dante kissed as he did everything, with controlled intensity, passion tempered by care. When they separated, both were breathless. "If we stay here," he said, his voice hoarse, "I won't be able to stop." "Then don't stop," she whispered against his lips. It was a line being crossed, and both knew it. There was no turning back, no possible regret. It was the beginning of something new, something that would be theirs alone. "At home," Dante said, kissing her again quickly. "When we're home." The drive back was a sweet torture. Hope was hyper-aware of Dante's every movement, of every glance he directed at her, of the implicit promise in every casual touch. The air between them was charged with a tension that seemed almost tangible. When they finally arrived at the ranch, Rose had already prepared dinner, but neither of them had an appetite for food. Dante led her through the house, but instead of stopping at her room, he headed towards his own. "Are you sure?" he asked once more, standing in front of the door. In response, Hope stood on tiptoe and kissed him. This time, there was no hesitation on either side. The night that followed was an education in every sense. Dante taught Hope things about her own body that she had never known, awakened sensations she didn't even know existed. But more than that, he taught her that intimacy could be shared power, not power over someone. When they finally fell asleep, intertwined in Dante's bed, Hope knew she had finally found her place in the world. Not as someone's daughter, not as someone's fiancée, but as herself. And for the first time in 21 years, she slept without dreaming of prisons. 2 months had passed since the night Hope chose to stay with Dante, and life on the Blackwood Ranch had found a rhythm she never imagined possible. Waking up in his arms, working alongside, him during the day, falling asleep listening to him tell stories about Helena. It was an intimacy that went far beyond the physical. That October morning, Hope was in the ranch office, organizing financial documents when Dante entered with a worried expression she had learned to recognize. "What's wrong?" she asked, saving the file on the computer. "I'm having a visitor soon," Dante said, sitting on the edge of the desk. "John Charles Morrison, from the Texas District Attorney's Office." Hope felt her stomach clench. Dante had mentioned John Charles a few times. They had been friends since adolescence, but he was also the prosecutor responsible for corruption investigations in the region. Does it have to do with Pastor Joshua? Among other things. Dante held her hand. Hope, I might need to travel for a few days. There are some legal matters I need to resolve personally. The idea of being without Dante, even for a few days, created an unexpected anxiety in Hope's chest. It wasn't dependence, she had learned the difference, but the genuine concern of someone who loves. What kind of matters? Before Dante could answer, Rose appeared at the door. Mr. John Charles has arrived, she announced. John Charles Morrison was a man of about 40, with greying hair at his temples, a serious demeanour that softened when he smiled. Hope had met him a few times when he visited Dante, always on professional matters, but there was a genuine friendship between the two men. Dante, he greeted, shaking his friend's hand. Hope, he turned to her with a gentle smile. How are you adapting to ranch life? Better than I expected, she replied sincerely. May I leave you two alone to talk? Actually, John Charles said, it would be better if you stayed. What I have to discuss with Dante concerns you as well. The three sat on the leather sofa in the office. John Charles opened a folder he had brought with him. Dante, the investigations into the financial activities of the congregation's Sons of Promise have yielded some interesting results. Pastor Joshua Sinclair is being indicted for embezzlement, money laundering, and tax evasion. We're talking about more than $2 million diverted over 5 years. And Samuel? Dante asked. Samuel Foster is being investigated as an accomplice. Apparently, his family was financing the illicit activities in exchange for political influence. John Charles turned to Hope. But there's something more complicated, Hope. They're trying to use you as a defense. What do you mean? They're alleging that you blackmailed them, that Dante was using you to extort them. They say the whole situation was a setup to appropriate Helena's properties. Hope felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. But that's a lie. I know that. You know that. Dante knows that. But they have expensive lawyers and are willing to destroy your reputation to save themselves. Dante stood up, walking to the window, his hands clenched into fists. What do I need to do? He asked without turning around. We need to go from defense to offense. I have a proposal, but it's risky. What proposal? John Charles opened another section of the folder. We found evidence that Pastor Joshua may have been involved in Helena's death. We can't prove it was murder, but there are irregularities in the original police report, discrepancies in testimonies, and a witness who was never heard. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Hope felt the world spin around her. Are you saying he killed my mother? I'm saying there's enough evidence to reopen the investigation, but that would mean exposing you to intense public scrutiny. Your life would be dissected by his lawyers, by the newspapers, by public opinion. Dante turned, looking directly at Hope. The decision is yours, he said, and she could see the pain in his eyes. It always will be yours. Hope thought of the mother she had never known, the woman who died trying to escape, the decades of lies that defined her life. What do we need to do? First, you'll need to record a detailed statement about your life with Pastor Joshua, all the control, all the manipulation, all the psychological abuse. Then we'll need physical evidence and letters, documents, anything your mother might have left behind. The letters, Hope said, remembering what Dante had mentioned in the temple. You said you have letters my mother wrote to you. I do, Dante confirmed. But they are difficult to read. Helena was clearly in distress when she wrote them. I need to see them. That afternoon, the three went to Dante's private safe, located in a secondary office in the house. He typed a long combination, revealing documents, jewelry, and a small but elegant wooden box. These are the letters, Dante said, handing the box to Hope carefully. Helena wrote to me for 5 years. The last 3 are disturbing. Hope opened the box with trembling hands. There were at least 20 letters, written in a delicate feminine script that she recognized immediately. It was almost identical to her own handwriting. The first letter was dated 6 months after Helena's marriage. My dear brother, I hope you are well and that business is prospering. Joshua says I shouldn't write to you, that I should focus on being a Christian wife. But I miss you terribly. Life here is very different from what I imagined. Joshua is a good man, but he has very rigid ideas about a woman's role. I can't go out alone. I can't wear the clothes I brought from home. I can't even read my medical books. He says they are worldly influences. Maybe he's right. Maybe I need to learn to be different. Hope felt tears welling in her eyes. It was her own life being described 22 years earlier. The second letter, 2 years later. Dante, I know you promised to respect my decision to marry, but I need to tell you something. Joshua is not the man we thought. He controls every dollar I spend, every person I see, every word I say. I tried to talk to the church leaders, but they say it's my duty as a submissive wife. I'm pregnant, brother. I'm going to have a child, and I don't know whether to be happy or terrified. What happened to us? How did we get to this point? The third letter, written when Hope was 6 months old. My dearest brother, Hope was born beautiful and healthy, thank God. But Dante, I need to get out of here. Joshua is becoming increasingly controlling, more violent when he thinks I'm questioning his authority. Yesterday he hit me because Hope was crying during his sermon. He hit me, Dante, with a closed fist. He said it was Christian discipline. I have a purple mark on my face that he told me to cover with makeup. I can't raise my daughter in this environment. Please, help me come home. The last letter was from just a few weeks before Helena's death. Dante, this may be my last letter. Joshua found the others and was furious. He said if I try to contact you again, he will lock me up and tell everyone I'm crazy. Maybe I am going crazy. I haven't slept in weeks, I can't eat, I can't stop crying. But I need to get out of here with Hope. Next Friday, Joshua is traveling to a conference in Washington, D.C. I'm going to try to escape. If anything happens to me, please protect my daughter. Don't let her live the life I lived. Don't let him destroy her like he destroyed me. With all my love, Helena. P.S. I left some hidden documents in the house. If you ever need proof of who Joshua really is, look behind the bookshelf in his office. There's a safe he thinks I don't know about. Hope finished reading with tears streaming down her face. John Charles and Dante waited in respectful silence. She knew, Hope said finally. She knew she was going to die. The date of the last letter, John Charles pointed out, is 3 days before the accident. It wasn't an accident, Dante said, his voice laden with cold anger. It never was. The safe, Hope said, wiping away her tears. She mentioned a safe. In his office. The problem is we need a warrant to search the pastoral house, John Charles explained. And to get the warrant, we need more evidence. I can get it, Hope said, surprising both men. Absolutely not, Dante said immediately. I won't let you get close to that man. Dante, I grew up in that house. I know where everything is. I know how to get in and out without being seen. I can get what's in the safe. It's too dangerous, John Charles agreed with Dante. If Pastor Joshua finds out, he won't find out, Hope said, and there was a determination in her voice that wasn't there 2 months earlier. My mother died trying to protect me. It's my turn to protect her memory. The discussion lasted for hours. Dante was vehemently against the idea. John Charles was concerned about the legal implications, and Hope was unyielding. There's a vigil at the church every Friday night, she explained. Pastor Joshua stays in the temple until at least midnight. The house is empty. I can get in, get what I need, and get out before he returns. What if it's a trap? What if they're waiting for you to do exactly that? Then we'll be prepared for that too, she replied. Dante, you taught me that sometimes we have to fight for what's right. This is my fight. That night, after John Charles left with the promise to return the next day with a more detailed plan, Dante and Hope were on the veranda, watching the stars over the plains. I'm scared, he admitted, holding her hand. Scared of losing you like I lost Helena. You won't lose me, Hope said, intertwining her fingers with his. I'm no longer that frightened girl you saved in the church. I'm the woman you helped discover who she is. And who are you? I am Helena Blackwood's daughter. I am someone who will not let injustice go unpunished. and I am a woman who loves you enough to fight for our future." Dante turned to look at her, his eyes shining in the dark. "Our future? Our family started here on this ranch with Helena and you. It was interrupted by the greed and control of a man who hid behind faith. But it wasn't destroyed. I am here. We are here. Hope. Marry me," she said, the words coming out before she could think them. "After we resolve all of this, after we get justice for my mother, marry me." The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. "I already consider you my wife," Dante said finally, "in all the ways that matter." "Then make it official. Give me your name. Let me truly be your family." Dante pulled her into his arms, kissing her with an intensity that conveyed all the words he couldn't say. "Helena Blackwood Sinclair," he murmured against her lips. "It has a beautiful sound." The next morning, they began planning the operation that would change their lives forever. John Charles brought miniaturized recording equipment, maps of the pastoral house, and church staff schedules. Dante organized a discreet security detail. Men he trusted would be positioned at strategic points around the property. "Remember," John Charles said during the final meeting before the plan's execution, "if anything goes wrong, if you feel the situation is getting out of control, abort immediately. No evidence is worth your lives." Hope nodded, but inside she knew she wouldn't abandon the mission. No matter what happened, she would see it through to the end. For Helena, for herself, for all the women still trapped in similar situations. Friday arrived with a sky full of clouds that promised rain. Hope put on dark clothes, tested the recording equipment one more time, and memorized every detail of the plan. "Any sign of danger," Dante said, holding her face between his hands. "Anything that seems wrong, you leave immediately." "Promise?" "I promise," she lied, kissing him one last time before getting into the pickup truck that would take her back to the place where she was born. It was time to discover the full truth about Helena Blackwood's death. It was time to get justice, and if in the process she had to face the man who had controlled her entire life, so be it. She was no longer the frightened girl he had raised. She was Helena's daughter, Dante's woman, and someone who finally knew who she was. The congregation Sons of Promise was illuminated like a cathedral as Hope approached from the back of the property. It was 10:30 on Friday night, and she could hear the vigil's hymns echoing through the complex. Pastor Joshua would be at the pulpit for at least another hour, enough time for her to find what she was looking for. The pastoral house was dark and silent. Hope knew every inch of that building. She had grown up there. She had been a prisoner there. Now, she returned as a free woman in search of the truth that had been denied for over 2 decades. She used the key she still kept. Pastor Joshua had never bothered to change it, probably certain she would never return. His office was on the 2nd floor, a room that had always been forbidden to her as a child. "Focus, Hope," she murmured to herself, turning on the small flashlight she had brought. The beam of light revealed shelves of theological books, an imposing mahogany desk, and pictures of Pastor Joshua with important political figures. Following the instructions in Helena's letter, she went to the back bookshelf. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just rows of theological books and biblical commentaries. But as she ran her hand along the back of the shelf, her fingers found an irregularity in the wall. It was a false panel, almost imperceptible. Carefully, she pressed on the edges until the panel gave way, revealing a small but solid safe embedded in the wall. The safe had an electronic lock. Hope tried some obvious combinations, biblical dates, the church's anniversary, her own birth date. Nothing worked. That's when she remembered something Helena had written in one of the letters. She had mentioned that Pastor Joshua was obsessed with the number 666 inverted, saying it was a way to ward off the devil. Hope typed 999. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, there were documents, photographs, and a small digital recording device. Hope quickly grabbed everything, without stopping to examine, focused on getting out of there as fast as possible. But as she was about to close the safe, a document caught her attention. It was a payment receipt dated 1 week after Helena's death. $5,000 paid to a man named Adonias Smith, with the description, "Special services rendered, matter resolved." Hope's heart stopped. It was direct evidence, a smoking gun that connected Pastor Joshua to her mother's death. That's when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Pastor Joshua had returned early from the vigil. Hope quickly closed the safe, put the panel back in place and tucked the documents into her bag. But it was too late. The office door opened and the light came on. "Hope." Pastor Joshua's voice was too calm, too controlled. It was the voice he used when he was most dangerous. "Father," she said, trying to sound casual, I came to get some things I left here." Pastor Joshua closed the door behind him and turned the key. The sound echoed through the office like a death sentence. "In my office? In the middle of the night? What things would those be, Hope?" He approached slowly, like a predator studying its prey. Hope backed away until her back touched the bookshelf. "I was looking for pictures of my mother," she improvised. "I remembered you kept some here." "Liar." Pastor Joshua stopped a few inches from her. "I know exactly what you came for. The question is, how did you know about the safe?" Hope's stomach dropped. He knew. Somehow he had always known. "I don't know what you're talking about." Pastor Joshua laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Helena told me about the letters, you know. In the end, she told me everything, including what she wrote to that delinquent brother of hers." "You forced her to tell," Hope said, "and it wasn't a question." "Forced?" Pastor Joshua tilted his head, pretending to consider the word. "No, Hope. I simply convinced her that honesty was the best policy, especially when her disobedience was putting my reputation at risk." "You killed her." The words came out before Hope could stop them. Pastor Joshua smiled, and it was the most terrible smile she had ever seen. "Prove it." "I have proof," she said, touching the bag where she had stored the documents. "Ah, yes, the documents from the safe." Pastor Joshua moved away slightly, walking towards the desk. "Do you really think I'd be foolish enough to keep evidence of my own guilt?" "The payment receipt for Adonias Smith." "Adonias Smith died 10 years ago, Hope. Crack cocaine overdose in a Houston slum. Very convenient, don't you think?" The horror of the situation began to take shape in Hope's mind. Pastor Joshua had not only killed Helena, he had meticulously planned everything, eliminating the evidence and the witnesses. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you kill my mother?" "Because she was becoming a problem," Pastor Joshua replied with the same ease with which he would discuss the weather. "Helena inherited a fortune, Hope. Properties, investments, liquid assets. All of that built this church, made me the influential man I am today. But she wanted to go back on it. She wanted to reclaim everything. She wanted to leave me empty-handed. So you killed her for money." "I killed her to protect the work of God," Pastor Joshua corrected, opening a desk drawer. "Helena was being influenced by the devil. She lost her faith, lost her way. It was my obligation as a Christian husband to correct her. And when you couldn't, you had her killed. The accident was a merciful way for God to solve the problem." Hope saw when Pastor Joshua took something out of the drawer. It was a small but lethal-looking revolver. "And now," he continued, pointing the gun at her, "you are making the same mistake as your mother, questioning authority, trying to destroy everything I've built." "People will notice if I disappear," Hope said, trying to keep her voice steady. Dante will find your body in the pond on his ranch," Pastor Joshua interrupted. "A tragedy. The disturbed young woman who ran away from home and got involved with a criminal couldn't cope with the guilt and committed suicide. No one will believe that." "They will, yes, especially when they find the suicide letter you're going to write, confessing that Dante forced you to blackmail the church, confessing that everything was his plan from the beginning." Pastor Joshua picked up paper and a pen from the desk, placing them in front of her. "Right." "No." The answer was firm, without hesitation. Pastor Joshua frowned. "Hope, don't force me to make this harder than it needs to be." "I said no." Hope straightened up, looking him directly in the eyes. I spent 21 years obeying your orders, believing your lies. I won't spend another second doing what you tell me. You have no choice. I always have a choice. My mother taught me that. Pastor Joshua tightened the fist holding the gun, his face red with rage. Helena was a rebellious whore who— He didn't finish the sentence. The office door exploded, flying off its hinges with a crash that echoed throughout the house. Dante entered like a storm, followed by John Charles and 2 police officers. "Drop the gun, Joshua," Dante ordered, his own pistol pointed at Pastor Joshua. "How dare you invade the house of a man of God?" Pastor Joshua shouted, but he didn't lower his weapon. "Search and seizure warrant," John Charles said, showing the document, "and an arrest warrant for aggravated homicide." "You have no proof of anything." "Yes, we do," John Charles smiled. "Hope has been wearing a microphone for 20 minutes. We recorded the entire confession." Pastor Joshua's face paled as he realized he had been tricked. "You—" He turned the gun towards Hope, but Dante was faster. The shot echoed through the office. Pastor Joshua screamed, the gun flying from his injured hand. In seconds, the police had him on the floor, handcuffed. "Hope!" Dante reached her side in 2 steps, checking if she was hurt. "Are you okay? Are you injured?" "I'm fine," she said, trembling more from adrenaline than fear. "I got everything we needed." "Damn you," Pastor Joshua shouted from the floor. "You don't know who you're messing with. I have influence. I have power." "Had," John Charles corrected, "past tense. Your only influence now will be deciding whether you want a public defender or a private one." As the police led Pastor Joshua, Hope opened her bag and showed the documents to John Charles and Dante. The payment receipt for the assassin, bank statements showing the diversions, and this. She held up a small digital recorder. "He recorded the forced confessions my mother made. It's all here, the whole truth about what he did to her." John Charles quickly examined the documents. "This is more than enough. Pastor Joshua will spend the rest of his life in prison." 6 months later, Hope was on the veranda of the Blackwood Ranch, wearing a simple cream-colored dress, watching the guests gather in the garden for her wedding. It wasn't a crowd, just the people who truly mattered. Rose had cried while preparing the garden, decorating it with flowers from the fields. John Charles would be Dante's best man. Some ranch employees and their families completed the small congregation. "Nervous?" Dante asked, appearing behind her and wrapping her in his arms. "Isn't it bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the ceremony?" she teased, snuggling against him. "I don't believe in superstitions, I only believe in you." Pastor Joshua's trial had ended 2 weeks earlier. He had been sentenced to 30 years in prison for aggravated homicide, embezzlement, and a list of other crimes. Samuel had received 5 years for complicity and attempted rape. The evidence was so overwhelming that not even the best lawyers could create reasonable doubt. "Are you thinking about them?" Dante asked, noticing her distant expression. "I was thinking about my mother," Hope admitted. "I wish she could be here." "She is," Dante said softly. "Helena is in every courageous choice you make, in every moment you choose to be free." The ceremony was simple and perfect. No religious pomp, no elaborate rituals, just 2 people, committing to build a life together. The justice of the peace who married them was a simple man from the region, who knew their story and treated them with the respect they deserved. "Dante Blackwood," he said when it was time for the vows, "do you take Helena Hope Sinclair as your wife to love and respect her in joy and sorrow, in sickness and in health, for the rest of your life?" "I do," Dante replied, his eyes shining. "Helena Hope Sinclair, do you take Dante Blackwood as your husband, to love and respect him in joy and sorrow, in sickness and in health for the rest of your life?" "I do," she said, her voice firm and clear. "Then by the authority vested in me by the state of Texas, I pronounce you husband and wife." The kiss that sealed the union was different from all the others. It was a promise, a beginning, a declaration that the past was finally buried and the future belonged to them. The party that followed was simple but joyful. Rose had prepared a banquet with typical Texas dishes. The employees played guitar and accordion, and Hope danced with her husband under the Plains stars. "Where are we going for our honeymoon?" she asked as they danced. "Nowhere," Dante replied. "Our place is here. Our home is here. What if I want to travel, see the world I never knew? Then we'll travel. We'll see everything you want to see. What if I want to study, finish high school, maybe go to college? We'll arrange the best tutors, the best schools. What if I want to have children? Dante stopped dancing for a moment, looking directly into her eyes. I want to have a family with you, Hope. I want to raise our children the way Helena wanted to raise you, with freedom, with love, with choices. Our children will know their grandmother's story, she said. They'll know that sometimes it takes courage to be free. And they'll know they'll always have our protection, but never our prison. When the party ended and the guests left, Dante and Hope stayed alone on the veranda, watching the sunrise paint the sky pink over the plains. Do you know what impresses me most? Hope said, her head resting on his shoulder. What? How life can change completely in such a short time. 8 months ago I was a prisoner in a gilded cage. Today I am a free woman, married to the man I love on a land that is rightfully mine. Life only changed because you had the courage to change it, Dante corrected. I merely offered the key. You are the one who opened the door. We opened the door, she corrected. Together. The sun was fully visible now, banishing the last shadows of the night. It was a new day, the first day of their lives as husband and wife, the first day of a future they would choose for themselves. Helena Hope Sinclair, Hope said aloud, testing the sound of her new name. I think my mother would approve. I'm sure she would, Dante replied, kissing the top of her head. She fought for you to be free. Now you are free to be whoever you want to be. Then I choose to be your wife, your partner, your equal. I choose to be the mother of our children, the owner of this land, the woman who will honor Helena Blackwood's memory by living the life she always dreamed of. And I choose to be the man who will love and protect you without ever imprisoning you, the man who will give you strength when you need it, and who will seek strength in you when I need it. They stayed like that until Rose appeared with breakfast, smiling at the sight of the two newlyweds embracing on the veranda. Life on the Blackwood Ranch would continue, but now with a new chapter, written by people who chose love over fear, freedom over submission, truth over lies. And on the silent nights of the plains, when the wind whispered through the soybean fields and pastures, some said they could hear the laughter of Helena Blackwood, finally at peace, knowing that her daughter had found her way home. Hope had discovered that true freedom was not just escaping the chains that bound her, but having the courage to build a life based on her own choices. And alongside Dante, she would do exactly that, choice by choice, day by day, for the rest of her life. Love had conquered fear. Truth had triumphed over lies. And Helena Hope Sinclair was finally free to be who she was always meant to be.